Greetings YouTube, Alan Lube is back. It's been a while, well, it kind of hasn't been a while. I've been posting some gameplay videos, but I said I was going to post a Dash deck tech, and it took a while for me to come out with it, and that's mainly because, like, every single game I played with Dash, it felt like I always wanted to change something, so at this point, I feel like it's, like, in an okay spot where I wouldn't change too much, but this is definitely one of those decks where I would need, like, a ton more reps before I actually felt confident in a list. But either way, I'm just here to show you what I'm working on at the moment. There's tons of other deck lists out there. I've looked through a lot of them. There was an article posted where I believe Carol also posted, Carol, the dev at LSS, posted an aggro-io list, which is quite similar to this one, but I don't necessarily agree with all of the cards in there, but I'll go into that. And yeah, I just want to also shout out all the people who helped me work on this. It's like been a fun little project for me. I've discussed a lot of ideas with Ian and Yuki and Oliver and just all the guys in the Stroopwafel. But yeah, let's just get right into it. Before I get into it, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. I'll probably post more gameplay with this deck just so you guys can get a feel for what the deck looks like and if it's something you want to play. I will say the deck is really fun to play, but I don't know if I would ever actually register this list at a larger event, like even a PQ. If I won a PQ and it was already qualified, I might play Dash at another one just to have fun. But yeah, let's get into the list. As you may know, 36 life, 4 intellect. You may look at the top card of your deck at any time. It's a great ability. You basically have like a 4.5 intellect hand, and even if you can't use the card on top, you have a lot of control over what you want to draw into if you're boosting, things like that, and you can set up really good turns for next turn. But the drawbacks come at the cost of playing all these items because they're no blocks. So if you're not being aggressive, or if you draw into a hand with like 3 items, you can't really do too much. So that's the main drawback. Achilles Accelerator. This is a boost-based list, so getting the extra action point is like another shot on your gun or another attack you can play without boosting if you're worried about fatigue, or you in some world you're able to line up a double max velocity. That's possible too. But yeah, Achilles is just great. You would pretty much always run it. The AB one is really nice too, so you don't have to sideboard additional AB slots for like Icelander or Kano. Crown of Providence I think is a must in this deck because there's just so many hands where you don't really do anything. So being able to filter at least one card to try to fix your turn is great. Also, since you can look at the top card of your deck at any time, you know what you'll draw from Crown of Providence at any moment. So that also plays into it as well. Goliath Gauntlet, this is mainly just for being aggressive. We're running boom grenades, and this effect only procs if you actually hit with an attack action card. So having Goliath Gauntlet to really push you over and get your value off boom grenade if your opponent decides to full block you that turn is important in my opinion. Symbiosis Shot. When I first saw this weapon, I wasn't too impressed, but after playing with it, I think it's a very interesting weapon. I'm not sure it's necessarily like overpowered or like extremely powerful or something. The fact that you can attack without paying any resources is really strong, but it comes at the downside of you have to play items in order to get counters. So if you're going through the game and you draw your high octane before you draw your items or play your items, then your high octane is kind of dead. Conversely, if you draw too many items and you don't draw into your high octane, your gun's going to have like 4 counters that's just unused. But overall, I think the flavor of the gun is really cool, and I've just really enjoyed playing with it. And then Teklo Foundry Heart is pretty self-explanatory. It gets you an extra resource on a lot of turns. Do note that it breaks the chain, so with some cards like Pulse Wave Harpoon, if you break the chain with Teklo Foundry Heart, then you'll get 1 less card to reveal from Pulse Wave Harpoon. But this is also great because my deck, or at least I built this to be a max velocity deck, and so having that 1 extra resource is often really big sometimes. Because you're often going like, you know, throttle, 2 boost, 0 cost boost, 0 cost boost, and then you need 1 extra resource for max velocity, which Teklo Foundry Heart can get. And max velocity also doesn't care about the combat chain, it only cares if you've boosted. So that's great. Yeah, that's the main equipment. Let's go into the main deck. So this is currently a 62 card list. I think since it's a boost list, it can sometimes be, it can mostly be okay to run more than 60, even if you're expecting like a fairly racy matchup. If you're certain that the opponent is like has a lot of 2 blocks and they're only going to race and they don't care about blocking, like maybe if you're playing against a very aggressive ninja or you're playing against an aggro dash mirror, then you can drop down to 60. But I think for like a lot of matchups where it's like they can be aggressive, they can block, you can go to 62, and then in the sideboard I'll have more cards to board up. But let's go into the actual cards. Boom Grenade, I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. It's the item with just the best rate. It costs 0, it can crank. If it hits, it deals 4 damage, and it gets a counter on your gun. So if you play it off the top, which whenever I'm assessing items, I'm always assessing when I play it off the top, just so there's consistency there. This card is basically 1 resource for 6 points of damage, which is great. The issue comes is if you draw it. If you draw it, you have 2 options. Either you play it out and then crank it to continue your turn, but you might not get the value off Boom Grenade if you have 1 less card to attack with and they just block out. Conversely, you can end your turn with it and then keep the steam counter on it and save it for next turn when hopefully you have more attacks so that you can get the value. You also don't have to worry too much about leaving counters on your gun, because hopefully you eventually draw into high octane, and whatever extra counters you may have, you will be able to make use of. Dissolving Shield is probably the next item I was most impressed with during spoiler season. Mainly for the fact is, once again, if you play it off the top and you don't need to crank it, it enters with 3 steam counters, you can block 3 damage, and you can shoot with your gun. So that's basically 1 for 5, similar to Boom Grenade. Well, Boom Grenade would be 1 for 6, but Dissolving Shield, 1 resource for 5 points is pretty good. But the 2 major pros of this card is that if you draw into it, it doesn't feel as bad to play and crank, because you at least get 2 steam counters from it and a shot off your gun, so it's 0 for 4 in a kind of way. The downside being you can't block with it, of course, if you need to stop an on hit. But also being able to cover your opponent's breakpoints and preventing even arcane damage is also pretty good. So it would be my next favorite red item after Boom Grenade, but I could be convinced to cut Dissolving Shield. Like, for the list, if I wanted to run a clean 60, I probably would just cut the Dissolving Shield, or not cut, but like put them into the sideboard to run a clean 60. But in terms of like just the items that I like the most, it would be Boom Grenade, then Dissolving Shield, and then Backup Protocol, but we'll get into that. And then the rest of the list is mainly just boost cards. Like, this list currently is running 17 items, which is quite high. I've run 15 before, and even that felt high. I've run 12, and that felt fine, but on the low side. In general, if you want to be more consistent, you run less items, but if you want to, maintain that dash high roll, you'll run more items. If you cut the Dissolving Shields out and run a clean 60 and have 15 items, I think that's a pretty okay spot. 15 items is kind of the point where, you will almost assuredly draw into some multi-item hands, but hopefully you can like sort of make do with them. The rest of the cards are mainly just efficient boost cards. I like Drive-Through Data because it lets you opt. It lets you dig for an item on the top if necessary. High Octane is pretty self-explanatory. You have a bunch of counters on your gun. You High Octane, you boost, 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 and then you shoot them a bajillion times with your gun. Max Velocity is just a great card. It blocks 3. It's 2 for 10. It's a popper. The hard part is actually just getting it off, but I run a lot of lower cost boost cards than some other lists I've seen, which is mainly just me trying to be more consistent when running Max Velocity. So that's just where I'm at with the deck. You can opt to not even run Max Velocity. You can run like Tomo Find All. You can run more monocles or like just other efficient boost cards or more items. But I just like this card a lot, so I've decided to kind of skew my deck towards hitting Max Velocity. Pulse Wave Harpoon, obviously a great card. If you need to boost at least 3 times this combat chain, including, or ideally you want to boost 3 times in the combat chain, including Pulse Wave, so you can have your opponent reveal 3 cards and take one of those cards and make them block with it. If you're against an opponent that's already blocking, it doesn't feel as great, but if you're against like an aggro matchup and you take like a Surging Strike or, another, like a Max Velocity or a High Octane or something, then it's great. Sprocket Rocket is kind of just there to be another 0-cost red boost. Originally, this was T-Bone because this deck was kind of skewed towards beating Lexi with like T-Bones and Meganetics. But outside of Lexi, those cards feel really bad. And even in Lexi, if the cards don't line up correctly, you're basically just running lower rate cards. So Sprocket Rocket is basically just, 0 for 3 boost. And sometimes you'll get the 0 for 4 boost, which is nice. Throttle is there. It's a popper. It's the most efficient 2-cost boost card. It's just a vanilla. Also running the blues. Twin Drive, I really enjoy this card. One, because it's in a max velocity list, so I want to be, boosting as much as possible. It pairs together with High Octane. It pairs together with Pulse Wave Harpoon. So these 3 cards all playing off Twin Drive is great. So I like the card. Rainbow 0 to 60, once again, just another vanilla boost card. That's the most efficient. Same with Zipper Hit. I'm not running the blue Zipper Hits, although you could. It's not that big a deal. Spark of Genius, one of the most broken cards in Dash. If this card didn't exist, Dash IO would be so much weaker. If it's early in the game, you can spark out a Techlo Core to set up, draw a card, arsenal a card. Or if it's like you're trying to trade damage, you can Spark of Genius into a Boom Grenade, crank it, get your action point back. And then if you've boosted this turn, you will draw a card. You close the chain that way. And it feels a little awkward because you have to attack, boost, then spark into a Boom Grenade. So you have one less attack to try to hit with that Boom Grenade. But, there's just a lot of playlines you can do with this card. And it's just great value. Backup Protocol Blue. I don't know if this is ideal. You could run blue Boom Grenades. I just really like this card. If you play it off the top, you get the counter for your gun, so that's 2 points of value on a blue, which is already okay. But you can pay those extra 2 resources, get a blue attack action back from your graveyard to your hand, and then that basically refunds the resource you spent for paying for Backup Protocol Blue. So off the top, it's 0 for 2 in a way, and you can also crank it, which means you get an extra action point. So there's just a lot of utility with this card, which is why I like it, especially in the blue. In general, I want my blues to kind of be like more utility-esque. Like I'm not worrying too much about getting good rate on my blues if they're, potentially fixing my hand or fixing my turn, things like that. Data Link, I literally just have in here as a 0-cost boost. You could run T-Bone, you can run Sprocket Rocket, you could run Zipper Hit even if you wanted a 1-cost attack. But I think Data Link is fine. It comes in for 1. Your opponent doesn't really want to block 1 unless they have an efficient 1-block armor. And then if it hits, you get to opt, which once again lets you fish for the better cards in your deck or an item on the top, things like that. This spot is pretty flexible. You can run like a bajillion different cards in this blue spot. I just think that since I'm so focused on max velocity in my deck, I want low-cost boost cards in my blues also, so I can try to be or efficiently get there on sort of like my off turns. 1 Optical Monocle. Originally, I ran 3, and if you get one out early, you can start fishing and doing some crazy things. But there are just some games where you draw 2 in your hand, and it's just like so terrible. If you draw this in your hand, it feels so bad, unless you can use the blue to pay for something else. If you play it off the top, obviously it's amazing. But it's just one of those like high variance cards. So if you wanted to, you could run more of these. You could run 2, you can run 3. But I think it's a good card, but I don't know if running 3 is correct. Maybe 2 is fine. Right now I'm at 1. I might up this again. I don't know. We'll see. Street Steel Hoons. This is a new card in Bright Lights. It's basically a 3 for 5 boost, assuming an item you control has been destroyed this turn, which is pretty on rate. If it was a red, that would be 3 for 7, which is, perfectly pretty on rate for even like a vanilla. But the main reason this is in here is because if you draw into a multiple blue hand, at least this gives you some sort of value. If originally I wanted to run just another 0-cost 1-attack blue, but then that runs into the risk of if I draw just like a 3 or 4 blue hand, my turn is really bad. So I think having Steel Street Hoons is pretty good. The Galvanize can also come in clutch sometimes if you play like a Boom Grenade and it doesn't go off, and then they attack you with like a Snatch or something. Maybe you can still block 4, popping that Boom Grenade to get some value off of it. But yeah, and then Techlo Core, probably the best item in the deck. 0 for 4 resources. You get a counter on your gun. You can play it off the top. You can spark it out. This card is just amazing. So yeah, that's the list that I've settled on so far. The list right now is pretty low cost, and that's mainly so I can try to get max velocity off. But with more reps, I would probably experiment more with like, maybe a blue Zipper Hit instead of Data Link, or maybe, a 1 for 4 here instead of a 0 for 3, and seeing how like the resource curve plays out. The list currently has, I think, 18 blues, which is a bit on the higher side. But, just in the beginning, I like to err with caution, and then maybe I'll go down and then see how that feels. But yeah, so that's the main board. My sideboard is fairly simple. Usually with decks, I like to make a sideboard that's simple. So Visiotronic, this is for Icelander, for Kano. You know, Kano's not going to be attacking you with attack action, so Crown of Providence is basically useless. And the effect on this card can actually work, but for the most part, I'm not playing around it too much. You have to boost, whenever you boost this turn, draw a card, and then put a card from your hand on top of your deck. So what that means is, it doesn't help you boost your first card. You'll boost your first card, and then you will be able to draw a card and put a card from your hand on top of your deck. So if you draw into an item, you can play like a 0 to 60 boost. After you boost, you'll draw a random card because you don't know what that card is going to be, and then you can put your item back on top. So it's awkward because you don't know what card you're going to draw into because you're actually drawing the second card from the top of your deck after you boost. But you know, if you have an item in hand and you get to play it off the top and you draw into like a great card, then it can be okay. But in general, this is just for AB2 for like Icelander and Kano and stuff like that. Adaptive plating. This is in here to replace Goliath Gauntlet for matchups that you need that extra armor block for, like Bravo or even Dorinthia, maybe Azuri, things like that. Things where you don't need the help from Goliath Gauntlet to push you over, and instead you just having that 3 block when you galvanize an item is pretty good. I have 3 extra blues in here because when I board up for slower matchups or matchups I think are going to fatigue me, then I can, you know, sort of have a decent resource curve. Teklo Pounder is also good in slower matchups because you have time to set up. But in faster matchups, I feel Teklo Pounder has been kind of a liability for me. There's just been more games where I didn't want to see it and then saw it. Cognition Nodes is also another card that helps for fatigue matchups. Basically, if you have an extra resource, you can put it on Cognition Nodes, and then anytime an attack action is going to hit, you can attack, react, and put it back on the bottom. So these 3 blues for fatigue matchups. I have Penetration Script. This is basically in here to replace Yellow Boom Grenade in the slower matchups because I think Red Boom Grenade obviously is great, but Yellow Boom Grenade, you run the risk of, if you don't get your boom grenades over the top and you don't actually hit with them, then they feel bad. Penetration Script, although it costs 1, at least, you know, nets you some value across your turn when you're boosting with attacks. BIOS Update. I played with this card in the main board at first, but I became less impressed with it the more I played with it, because if I see an item on top, most likely I'm going to play it from the top rather than BIOS Update boost into a card. Obviously, you save the resource if you're allowed to BIOS Update it, but once again, it's a non-attack action. It doesn't boost itself, so like it doesn't help with max velocity. So I left it more in the sideboard for the slower matchups where you can, you know, maybe even boost a Teklo Pounder out or something like that. And then Backup Protocol Red. This is also just sort of like another card that I enjoy. I really like Backup Protocol Blue, so Backup Protocol Red is really fun to play also. Sometimes you can, you know, pay 2, get back a max velocity, arsenal it, and then hopefully draw up into a card where you can play it again. Being able to chain max velocity is really powerful. So having Protocol Red is pretty nice. In the slower matchups, I would probably just replace like Dissolving Shield with Backup Protocol Red, put in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 extra cards, and go to 71. That seems a little high. I might consider cutting, you know, 3 more cards if I'm boarding up like that. But yeah, 3 extra blues. Oh no, yeah, Penetration Script replaces Boom Grenade. Backup Protocol replaces Dissolving Shield. So you're adding in 6 extra cards. So you're going to 68. That's not that bad if you're boarding up. If you're having trouble getting fatigued, maybe you just board, I don't know, 70 something, whatever, 62 plus 9, 11, 73. I don't know. I in general, I don't like just piling my whole deck, even for a fatigue matchup. I still think you need to run the correct cards for the matchup. But yeah, that's been my deck so far. I think the whole deck is only 78 cards. No, it's 80 cards. Okay. So yeah, that's where I'm at with the list right now. I'll probably play some more games with it and post that. In general, I feel like Dash is... I wouldn't say she's going to be a meta deck, but maybe when more people play with her and figure her out and, you know, really get her to that really efficient point, maybe. But I just think there are just some games where the deck loses to itself. Like the deck plays like a mixture of Wizard and Mechanologist and Runeblade, where you're like playing out items and attack actions, kind of like Runeblade and their non-attack actions. You get to play from the top, so you're kind of like Kano in a weird way. You get to do things at instant speed. But the deck is also kind of like Levia, where sometimes you just draw a really bad hand and you lose to yourself. Like if you're playing Bravo, for example, or at least I'm used to playing Bravo, if I draw into a 4 blue hand, at least I can still block, swing my hammer, do something. If you draw into like a 4 item hand here, you're just like, this is absolutely terrible. Or even a 3 item hand, and you just crank, you know, play an attack, pass, or something. It's just not, it's not great. But in general, I think the deck is extremely fun. It's probably the most fun I've had with the deck in a long time. And I do think there's a lot of room to explore for Dash still in the future. Maybe someone will figure out like a more mid-range list with Galvanize and more blocking items rather than offensive items. But I think just because your weapon so heavily incentivizes you to get extra action points somehow, someone will either need to figure out how to make system reset work, which I haven't, or you just play into high octane, which means you need to play into boost, which means you need to be more aggressive. So yeah, that's just where I'm at with the deck. I'll leave it in the description. I'll also leave Carol's list in the description if you want to play that list, because, you know, LSS Dev, I would trust his list more than mine, but this is just where I'm at right now. And yeah, hopefully you have some fun with this deck, or you just, you know, want to see it to see what I'm playing in my gameplay videos. But yeah, I'll probably play a few games with this deck and then post it, and then, I don't know, maybe I'll do another tier list in the future. So yep. Thanks for watching. If you made it to the end, like, subscribe, comment, do all that stuff. Please leave me suggestions on how my list could be better. Maybe some cards you found that really work in your list that I haven't tried out yet. But yeah, that's all from me, and thanks for watching.